Hello. Today, I want to explore the topic of mistakes. And I also want to offer you a reframe for anything you may perceive as a mistake. So the first thing is, what are mistakes? Well, the way I define mistakes is we made a choice, and that choice did not turn out the way we wanted it to turn out. And because it turned out in a different way than we wanted it to turn out, we judged ourselves and shamed ourselves, and we labeled what we did as a mistake. In essence, we allowed our action to take away from our sense of worth or self-worth, you may say. And when we have this perception that we have made a mistake, what's going to happen within us is there's going to be a tightening up around making decisions that require to be made in our lives. Especially if you are an entrepreneur or somebody who is in a relationship. I get this a lot from my clients. They come over to me and they say, I've made mistakes in my relationship. I've made mistakes in my business, and I can't seem to get past these mistakes. So this reframe will be really useful to you if you are in that category of judging yourself for something you've done in the past, and that judgment continues to stick with you. So anytime we have a perception of we could have done something differently than we did in the past, that is us policing ourselves and judging ourselves and labeling ourselves as bad in that moment. So where does this come from? Well, it goes back to our childhood. If our parents projected their values onto us, and they didn't allow us to have a sense of self with ourselves, we're going to feel like when they gave us the feedback around our actions, we're going to feel like we made a mistake. Now, when we get this feedback that we have made a mistake, if it was approached in not a very emotionally intelligent manner by our parents, what happened is our nervous systems actually withdrew, and we actually told ourselves that something was wrong in the moment. And when we perceived that we were having an experience that was scary or challenging, we may have just withdrawn from the situation and said, even tightened up and then said, I'm not going to allow myself to make this kind of mistake again. So when we have that sense of withdrawal and that sense of resistance to making mistakes, that can actually really be detrimental in a relationship as well as in our businesses. If you're the ones making decisions in our businesses, it's going to be really detrimental to us. So it's really important for us to actually look at the mistake from a new perspective and reframe the mistake so we don't keep judging ourselves in the way that we did in the past. Now, I'm not saying that you should not be tuned in to what the outcomes were when you made a certain decision. But what I want you to also recognize, because it's a very subtle thing, if you did not go through that so-called decision of you making a mistake in your decision, then how would you know on the other side that in fact that was a mistake or something you should not have done? So this is the key point that I want you to recognize about your mistakes, is that we do have to also allow ourselves to explore our boundaries and our realities without injecting other people's values, other people's beliefs into our situation. Now, as children, we are actually somewhat put in a vulnerable situation of trusting the authority figures that come into our lives, our caregivers. We give them our authority, our inner authority, hand that over, and we say, take care of my authority, and I'm leaving myself in your hands. I literally mean myself in your hands. So when we make a mistake, we withdraw and surrender our sense of self in favor of the other person's sense of self, because they are the ones that have the authority over you. So this is something I want you to really tune in when we get into the reframe part of the mistakes. It's going to be really important to understand this. And so the sense of policing has actually come in from our childhood. And in many ways, we also need to develop our sense of self by actually making decisions for ourselves. So the reason this hangs out with us as shame also has a purpose. And the reason it hangs out with us is so we can see where we have started to actually peel back the layers of authority that we've given up within ourselves to others. So now it's an opportunity to actually reclaim that authority. So that's the first belief shift we want to have when it comes to mistakes. In fact, it can apply to any situation, but specifically in the context of mistakes, this is the first reframe we want to start to have. The next piece is, as we say, hindsight is 20/20, right? So if we didn't have this growth by taking the actions we did as a result of the information we had in the moment, then how do we end up with the conclusion that it in fact was not the best thing to do? Well, at the time that we had the information that we did, we thought it was the best thing to do. And that's why we acted in a way that was conducive to that. We took the information we had and we acted in the manner that we could best in the moment. That is the first shift in belief that we must have, is that the mistakes continue to happen from that point all the way out into the future, because they don't. Without you having gone through that experience, would you now have a different perspective on what happened back then? I bet the answer is no. So this might look like I dated this man who I thought would be great for me. Then I went into the relationship. I gave in on in many areas, on many topics, because I thought it was a really great relationship. I thought I had all this information around it that really gave me the signals that it was a great relationship. And the reality is you did have all of that information that gave you the sense that it might have been a great relationship. That's why you acted in the way that you did. So now with that, you now have learned something else. And this is really key, because you as a soul came here to learn. You came here to grow and evolve. So in the path, you are going to make some decisions that lead to the outcomes that you have desired and wanted, and some decisions that you will make that will not lead to the outcomes that you want. But now you will have the birthing of a new desire within you to have a different outcome. Now, how else can you have that without having gone through this experience, this prior experience which you perceived as a mistake? how else could you actually know that and embody that in this moment? Sometimes we might have known otherwise, even in the moment where we made a decision and yet gone along and said, this is how I'm going to do things. So why do we do that? And what is the reframe for that? The first thing I want you to realize is you cannot change what has already happened. So if you have actually known in that moment that you should not have done something and you still went ahead and did it, what has that now taught you right now? And why has that learning been so important for you right now? So that's what I want you to look at. So the key things that I want you to tap into are, what are you grateful for in this moment that you would not otherwise be grateful for if you hadn't, quote unquote, made the mistake? That's the first question you're going to ask. Human beings never make a decision on anything without having a perception of that decision giving them an advantage. So I want you to look at what advantages it has given you from that point until now in your life, especially around the things that matter the most in your life. And as a result of you making that mistake, having that perception of having made that mistake, what did you decide to change in the future? What has actually gained momentum inside of you that you absolutely decided to change? When you can start to really be genuine and open and honest with yourself to answer these questions without censoring yourself, by really integrating all of the truths that come out through your intuition, you will actually realize that the mistake is only occurring in perception. And in reality, you actually grew, you evolved, you learned, and your heart opened more as a result of that mistake. You actually learned something and decided to do something differently. So the frame up is that mistakes are not mistakes. We must allow ourselves to take action and sometimes be okay with that not turning out the way we want it to turn out. And looking back is when we learn, where we learn and how we learn, how that action did serve us, how that action actually did benefit us, and how in fact we have actually grown and evolved as a result of that action that we took. When we can approach life with a sense of curiosity and openness instead of judgment, then we can start to live with that sense of openness and judgment in such a way that others can step into that. Others can recognize that within ourselves. And what I found in 20 years of working in mind, body, as well as human behavior, is we can actually sometimes be our worst critic. So when we can step back and not allow our self-worth to be defined by our perceptions of how things may or may not have benefited, but in fact, looking at the reality of how it did benefit and how it did serve, we can calm our nervous system down. We can unfreeze from the previous responses of freezing that we might have had, and we can step into a new way of being and living where we embrace life in a more open way that will help us to grow and evolve even more. And this is really the soul state of living. And this is what I want you to recognize, that nothing is really missing, even through your mistakes. Have a good day.